Okay, let's get going, Rabbi. We're on DAF Samachei Amud Aleph at the two dots. Tana Rabbanan. We're talking about the halacha of being able to divorce a wife after 10 years of childlessness. If she hasn't born children, then the Mishnah had said to divorce her. And we learned yesterday that in general she's entitled to her ksuva, because the general idea, or the general attitude of the Gemara is that since the man has the mitzvah of pru'ervu, at least according to the Chachamim, and the woman does not, so then he was not zoche, he did not have the privilege of being able to build a family and fulfill his mitzvah through her. And in other words, he can't say that to her, but she can say that to him. And as a result, she's entitled to collect her ksuva. Look, it didn't work out. It's not my fault. It must have been your fault on a metaphysical level. And therefore, you have to give me the ksuva. Let's go on. Tana Rabbanan. Niseis l'rishon v'lo hayu labanim, l'sheni v'lo hayu labanim, l'shlishi lo tinase, ela l'mishi yesh labanim. So the Brisa first tells us that, remember we learned that she's allowed to marry a second husband, but if the second husband also she doesn't have children with, then she has to leave that husband as well, and she's not allowed to marry a third husband. If she does want to marry, she has to marry a fellow who's already fulfilled the mitzvah of pru'ervu, because otherwise she would not be allowed to, a man would not be allowed to marry her if he still has the mitzvah to fulfill. But then the Brisa says, if she does marry a third husband who hasn't yet fulfilled the mitzvah, then the halacha is he's to divorce her, or he can divorce her, and does not have to pay her the kasuva, because since she wasn't entitled to marry him, and she's already established that chazaka that we talked about yesterday, that she's not going to be bearing a husband children, so therefore she's not entitled to her kasuva, because now we can say really she is the cause of the childlessness. So now the Gemara raises an interesting question. Let's say she marries a third husband and does not bear him any children. So the question then becomes, hasn't this now demonstrated that it's really her fault, not her husband's fault? It's one thing to say for two husbands, listen guys, you weren't Zechus, so therefore pay me the ksuva. It's your problem, it's not my problem. But now that she's gone to a third husband and has not borne him any children, that's a much clearer indication that really the issue is her, not the husband's. Can they go back and say, give us back the money from the ksuva? We're entitled to a refund. So mi matzu amri la igloi milsa da'atu degaramt, o dilma matzis amr lahu hashtahu dekachashi. Can they say, this is an indication that you're the cause? Or can she say back to them, no. For the first 20 years of marriage, my first 10 years, second 10 years, I was perfectly healthy. It's only now that I'm slowing down, right? It's now that I'm weak and can't have children. But before I could have children, it was your fault. So the Gemara says, Mistavra matzis amr lahu hashtahu dekachashi. The Gemara says it makes sense that she could make that argument because, after all, she's the muchzak, she's the one who's got the cash. So normally we would say, Hamotzi mechaver olav haraya. Ibayalahu nises l'revi v'hayu labanim mahu detit va'e l'shlishi. So now another question. She marries the first guy, no children. Marries the second guy, no children. Marries the third guy, no children. And the third husband, we said, divorces her without a ksuva. Now the question is, what if she marries a fourth husband, and she has a child from the fourth husband? So really, the whole reason why the third husband divorces her without, and she's not entitled to her ksuva, is because she's already demonstrated that she's the cause of the childlessness. But now that she married a fourth husband and shows that she is capable of having a child, can she go back to the third husband and say, give me the ksuva? You got rid of me without a ksuva because you assumed that I was the cause. You see, I'm not. So do we say Amrinan Lush? So we say the Gemara says Amrinan Lush tikusayach yafa midiburayach the matzi amar la ana adai dedahachi lo geirashtich. So the Gemara says, you know what? We better tell her to be quiet. We tell her, you know what? It's better to be silent than to speak up, because you're going to do more damage to yourself by speaking up than being silent. If you speak up, okay, fine, maybe you'll get the ksuva. But there's another problem. The the third husband will argue that I only divorced you because I thought you were not going to bear me any children. But now that I see that you can bear children, I regret having ever given you the divorce. And maybe he could argue the divorce was done betos, it was done under false pretenses, and therefore the divorce is not a divorce, and your newborn child is a mamzer. Right? So we don't want that to happen, so therefore we tell her, don't say anything. So Maskefla Rav Papa, Ihi Shaska Anon Mishaskinan, Nimsa Get Batil Boneha Mamzer. And he says, Rav Papa says, if that's a good argument to make, then who cares whether she speaks up or someone else speaks up? If you're going to argue that that's a valid argument for the third husband to make, that because I only divorced you because you didn't have children, and now I see that you can have children, then I don't want the divorce to be a divorce, then who cares whether she says it or someone else says it? It should be a problem unconditionally. So Ella what? Ella Amrina and Hashtahu de Briasa. But rather, Rav Papa says that's not a valid argument. Really, a woman can say, after having her child on the fourth husband, is she says, you know what? You're right. I was infertile for the first three husbands. It really was from me. And for some reason, whatever blockage I had that now is unblocked, that just happened when I married the fourth guy. It's got nothing to do with you guys. It was me. I was the problem. And therefore, don't tell me that you divorced me under false pretenses. When you divorced me, Itaka wasn't fertile. Okay. And therefore, she does not have the right to go back to the third husband and ask for the ksuva. Okay. Now, who amar mina, v'hi amar minei. So now the Gemara asks the next question. What if the husband says, the cause for our childlessness is my wife. My wife is infertile. And she says, what are you talking about? I'm fertile as a turtle. And the cause for our childlessness is my husband. He's the one who's what do they call it? Shooting blanks, right? It's his problem, right? So Amar Rabbi Ami Dvarim Shebeino Leveina Ne'emenes. So Rabbi Ami says she's more believed than he is. Now, what is this Gemara talking about? Doesn't this contradict everything that we've learned up until now? We just learned previously that we learned in yesterday's Gemara that anytime a couple is childless, the woman is entitled to her ksuva automatically, because since he has the mitzvah of pru'ervu and she doesn't, we assume that he's more at fault than she is. So how can this Gemara be talking about this scenario where there's an accusation back and forth and we say we believe her? Even without her claim that it's my husband's fault, we would believe her because of the issue that he wasn't zoicha to have children, because he's the mitzvah of pru'ervu. So what is this whole discussion? So Tosfos says we're talking about a case where the husband previously had children from another marriage, and in that situation, it's a more difficult of an argument to make the metaphysical argument that he wasn't zoicha to have children, right? Because he already was zoicha to have children. So that's what Tosfos speaks out, is that we're talking about a guy who was previously married, had his kids, marries this woman, and they're not having any children. He says you're the reason for the infertility, and she says you're the reason for the infertility. So in that case, even though he's already had children, we still believe her, and therefore if he wants to divorce her, he has to give her the ksuva.
And then he have a chazaka?
No, not necessarily, because sometimes people's physiology changes over the time, and right?
So if he already had children, the reason why he can divorce is because he was mechayev the mitzvah of pru'ervu, but he already had pru'ervu.
No, the question is, what if he says, I only married you under the pretense that I wanted to have kids, more kids with you? So he says, if you're infertile, then that's one of the bases for getting the ksuva. So the Gemara says, V'taimamai, hi kayamala biyorik achetz, hu lo kimle biyorik achetz. And the reason why we believe her more, even though it's got nothing to do with a metaphysical zechus, is because here they're both arguing whose physiology is flawed. The man is not believed. The woman is believed because she's saying that you're not shooting straight, that you're not yorek achetz. The Gemara says that if you have to ejaculate straight in order to be able to impregnate a woman, if he has a condition like hypospadias or some other kind of condition that prevents him from having a proper seminal flow, then she'll be able to know that more than the man will. A man does not recognize that as much as the woman does. She'll be able to examine herself afterwards and see where the deposit was, and she'll be able to know that it didn't go correctly. Omar Ihu, Ezel Insiv Itza V'ivdok Nafshoi. Well, what if the husband persists and he says, you know what? I still don't believe that I'm the cause. Let me marry another woman and we'll see if I can have more children with her. So, Omar Rabbi Ami Af Bezu Yotzi V'yitein Ksuva Shani Omer Kol Anosi Ishal Ishto Yotzi V'yitein Ksuva. So there too, Rabbi Ami says, no, your wife can stop you from doing that because, and if you insist on it, she can still demand the ksuva and together with the get. And the reason is because even though a man is allowed to have multiple wives, but it can only be with the consent of his present wife. You can't. Rabbi Ami has a shita, which I don't think we've seen yet, which is that even though yes, it's perfectly permissible al pi halacha to marry a second wife before the cherem of Rabbeinu Gershom, but nevertheless you got to get your wife's rishus, and if she says no, and you still insist on doing it, she's entitled to a divorce with the ksuva. Rava Amar Nosei Adam Kamanoshim Al Ishto V'hu Isla Lemezei Nayu, and Rava disagrees. He says you don't have to consult your wife to marry as many wives as you want, provided that you have enough parnasa to sustain them all. For us, it's enough to sustain one wife. That's already breaking the bank, right? Okay. Hu Amar apalt begaveser v'hi amra lo afolis. Now let's say the man says to the woman, I don't want to divorce you. I want to stay married with you. And the reason is because you're not infertile, because you had a miscarriage within the 10 years. And we learned yesterday that if a woman miscarries, the timer starts all over again. And therefore he says, I don't want to divorce you. I don't want to have to pay out the ksuva. It's not a question of infertility. We just have to wait a little longer. But she says, no, I want out of the marriage. So the Gemara is saying the nafkamina would be is as far as the ksuva. If she insists on leaving, then she would forfeit the ksuva based on the fact that his argument is that you haven't demonstrated the childlessness of our relationship over 10 years. So Amar Rabbi Ami af bezuhi ne'menes de'misati pila nafsha be'akara salo mechazka. But Rav Ami says no. Here too we believe her more than him. If she says I never miscarried over 10 years, we believe her, and therefore if she wants out, then the husband pays her the ksuva. And why is it? Because a woman would never, even for money, she would never assume herself as being an akara, as being an infertile woman. Look at the stigma that would be attached to her. And therefore, if she wasn't telling the truth, she never would say such a thing. So hipila v'chazr v'hipila v'chazr v'hipila huchsaka l'nefalim. Now the Gemara says something that we hadn't seen. We had assumed the otthe way yesterday. The Mishnah had only told us about a woman who is not able to conceive, but it sounded like from the Mishnah that if she's able to conceive but she has a miscarriage, that's not a reason to divorce her after 10 years. But the Gemara over here says just the opposite now. The Gemara says that if a woman has multiple miscarriages, so she's demonstrated over the course of 3 pregnancies that she's not able to carry the child to term, then that's automatically a basis for divorce. And it sounds like from the Gemara that you don't even have to wait 10 years. Once she's established that pattern and you say, listen, I want to have children, I'm very sorry, but you're not able to carry, then you have to divorce her. And she's already established herself. And Rashi over here says, but here too, you have to give her the ksuva, because once again, she can say, you weren't zoiche, because you have the mitzvah of pru'urvu. So hu amar apila trei v'hi amra tlas. Now what if he says that you miscarried twice, and therefore it's not yet time to divorce you? And she says, no, I miscarried 3 times already, and I want out. So Amar Rabbi Yitzchak ben Elazar, Uvda hava be medrash Amru hi mehimna di'imisa de lo aflo nafsha benifli lo mechazka. And he said, Rabbi Yitzchak ben Elazar said, we had this actual case in the base medrash. We asked around, and the consensus of the Chachamim was that she's believed again, that she miscarried 3 times, because a woman would never place herself under that a stigma unless it was true. Even if it means, like the point is, why is she saying this? Because she wants out of the marriage. She wants to move on with her life and maybe get pregnant from another man. Right? So, but she wouldn't do that unless it was true, because no woman wants to have the stigma of being someone who isn't capable of carrying a pregnancy full term. Let's go on to the next Mishnah. Ha'ish mitzuva al priya urvia of aloha isha. This is what we've been working under the assumption all the time, that only the man has the mitzvah of pru urvu and not the woman. But here's a machlokes. Rabbi Yochanan ben Baroka Omer al Shneim hu Omer vayivarach osam Elokim vayomer lohem Elokim peru urvu. No, he says no. The Torah says to both Hashem says to both Adam and Chava that you shall be fruitful and multiply. And therefore he holds that the mitzvahs on both of them. So we'd have to readjust all of our Gemaras that we saw up until now, as far as the laws of Ksuva and so forth, based on, that all goes according to the Chachamim, not according to Rabbi Yochanan ben Baroka. The Gemara now asks, Minahani Mili, where do the Chachamim know that the mitzvah is only on the male? Amar Rabbi La, Amishum Rabbi Lazar, Rabbi Shimon, Amar Kra, Umilu Es Haaretz V'chiv Shuha. Because Hashem said after the words Pru Urvu, fill the earth and conquer it. So Ish Darcho Lechabesh, Vein Isha Darka Lechabesh. That only a man has the norm of conquest. You don't associate conquest to women, and therefore the context of the pasuk is referring to the male. So Adarabba v'chivshuha tarti mashma, but the Gemara says maybe not. Maybe just the opposite. The word v'chivshuha is in the plural. You plural conquer the world. So it is a reference to both man and woman. But Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak v'chivshuha ksiv, yes, but the word v'chivshuha is written without the vav to imply it's referring to one person and not two. Rav Yosef Amar Mehacha, he says I have a different pasuk. He says Ani kel shakai perei urvei v'lo kamer pru urvu. Because at one point in the pasuk, this is in really Hashem says to Avraham, he says, "I am God. You shall be fruitful and multiply." And here he speaks to Avraham in the singular. So therefore, you see that when speaking to the very first Jew, Hashem gives him the mitzvah of pru'urvu in the singular to mean that it refers only to the male. So now that we're learning some Agadata from Rabbi Law in the name of Rabbi Lazar Reb Shimon, we're going to bring other things from them as well. V'amar Rabbi Law mishum Rabbi Lazar Reb Shimon kishem shemitzvah al adam lomar davar hanishma kach mitzvah al adam shelo lomar davar she'eno nishma. Just like it's a mitzvah for a person to say something that needs to be heard, so too it's a mitzvah to not say something that will not be heard. Meaning that if you know that something is correct, but you know that the person you're speaking to is not ready to hear it, like Jack Nicholson said, you can't handle the truth, so you shouldn't say it. Whereas you have to know who your audience is, because sometimes you could do more damage by saying something that is true if the person's not ready to hear it. Rabbi Abba Omer Choiva. Rabbi Abba says it's an obligation to not say that which will not be heard. Shenamar al toichach leitz pen yisnaecha hocheach lechacha meviyeh ha'avecha. As the pasuk in Mishlei says, do not rebuke the scoffer lest he hate you, but rather only rebuke the wise man so that he will love you. V'amar Rabbi La mishum Rabbi Lazar Reb Shimon mutar lo la'adam l'shanos bidvar hashalom. That it is permitted for a person to alter the truth, which means to lie. You're allowed to lie in order to create shalom. Shenamar avicha tziva v'goymer chosomru liyosef anasana v'goymer. That in Parshas Vayechi, the brothers come to Yosef and they tell him something that their father had said that he had never said. They said that anasana peshach achecha v'chatasam ki ra'agim alucha. That they said that our father said that you have to be moichel us, you have to forgive us. Now Yaakov never said that. He never said that. So the fact that they made this story up was they did it because they wanted shalom. And therefore, for the sake of shalom, you're allowed to lie. And Reb Nassan Omer mitzvah. Reb Nassan says not only are you allowed to, but it's a mitzvah to. Shenamar vayomer Shmuel eich elech v'shama shul v'haragani v'goymer. There's a story that it was Hashem told Shmuel, you have to anoint David by the Mishkan, by the Mizbeach. And Shmuel said, how am I going to anoint David as the new king by the Mizbeach? Shaul will see what's going on and he's going to want to kill me. So Hashem says, well, you know what? Take an animal with you and you'll tell Shaul when he says, where are you going? You tell him I'm going to bring a korban. See, he won't know that you're going to the Mizbeach to anoint David. He'll think you're going to bring a korban. So that shows me that even Hashem himself sanctions it, which is therefore, you see, it's not just permitted, it's a mitzvah to do it. Now, it's a little bit strange, because this pasuk is where Shmuel is scared for his life. Not so much that he's scared for shalom. So you have to say that no. Once Hashem tells you to do something, you don't have to fear for your life anymore. The only thing that you have to worry about is, what about the discord that's going to be created? You don't want people to hate each other, and that's why Hashem told them to do it. Okay, there's more to be said. Devei Rabbi Shmuel Tana Gadol Hashalom Shafa Kadosh Baruch Hu Shinabo the Mikaraksiv Adoniza Kain Alvasavksiv Anizakanti. And similarly, Devei Rabbi Shmuel teaches how great Shalom, even HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself changes the truth. right? He'll change the story, because when Sarah laughed, because she said, my husband is old, and yet when Hashem related that to Avram, that Sarah had laughed, he said that Sarah laughed because she said that she was old. And Hashem didn't want there to be any discord between Avram and Sarah, and that's why he changed the story. Rabbi Yochanan ben Baroka Omer. So let's go to the sheet of Rabbi Yochanan ben Baroka. He says that the mitzvah of Peruva was on both of them. Itmar Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, Chad Omer halacha Rabbi Yochanan ben Baroka, v'chad Omer ein halacha Rabbi Yochanan ben Baroka. So we have a machlokes whether the halacha is like Rabbi Yochanan ben Baroka or not. Tistayim, the Rabbi Yochanan hu da'amar ein halacha. Let us be able to infer from the following story that Rabbi Yochanan is paskening not like Rabbi Yochanan ben Baroka, but rather like the Chachamim, that is only on the male. And how can we infer that? The Yosef Rabbi Avohu kamar mishmei de Rabbi Yochanan halacha v'hadrino Rabbi Ami v'Rabbi Asi le'apayu. Because there was once a story that Rabbi Avohu was sitting and teaching Torah, and he said that Rabbi Yochanan paskins like Rabbi Yochanan ben Baroka, that the mitzvah is on both of them. When Rabbi Ami and Rabbi Asi hear this, they turn their faces to the side. And they did that to show their displeasure with that teaching, because they held that Rabbi Yochanan does not hold like Rabbi Yochanan ben Baroka. So therefore you see that we can infer from that story that according to Rabbi Yochanan, the halach is not like Rabbi Yochanan ben Baroka. V'ika da amri Reb Chia bar Abba amar ve'adrino Rabbi Ami v'Rabasi li'apayu. And some say that it wasn't Rabbi Avohu who was quoting Rabbi Yochanan in that story, but rather Reb Chia bar Abba. So the Gemara now says, Amar of Papa Bishlam Lamand Amar Rabbi Avohu Amar Mishum Kavod Beikeselo Amru Levelo Midi Elamand Amar Reb Chia bar Abba Amru Lemru Le Lo Amar Rabbi Yochanan Hachi. I don't understand. The first version of the story makes more sense, because Rabbi Avohu was a political figure, and because he was a political leader as well as a rabbinic sage, they needed to accord him certain respect that was due to him because of his political station. And therefore, it would make sense why they just turned their faces to the side to show their displeasure and did not directly contradict him. But Reb Chia bar Abba was not a political figure. He did not hold any station in government. So why couldn't they just tell him, we're sorry, Reb Chia bar Abba, you're mistaken in your citation of Rabbi Yochanan, because Rabbi Yochanan does not hold like Rabbi Yochanan. Why couldn't they just say that straight out? So my Havi Allah, what was the final upshot? Tashma, the Amar Reb Acha, Bar Chanina, Amar Reb Avohu, Amar Rabbi Asa. So here you have Rabbi Avohu and you have Rabbi Asi, both quoting and saying as follows. There was once a story that a woman came before Rabbi Yochanan in the sanctuary or the synagogue of Kesari. And he said, after she said, listen, I want out of this marriage, I'm not having any kids with this guy. So he said that the husband, you have to divorce her and give her the ksuva. So the Gemara says, and if you're going to argue that she does not have the mitzvah, by what right does she have to demand the ksuva? Now this is again very bizarre. We just learned previously that it's dafka the opposite, that the whole reason that she's a right to the ksuva is because it's not her fault, because the husband only has the mitzvah and she doesn't have the mitzvah. So the Gemara seems to go and be reversing itself. So the Gemara, the response that Tosfos gives over here is like this. Really, in reality, we're talking about a case where we know for sure that the husband is the infertile party. He's the one who's not able to impregnate his wife. She's completely fertile. But the argument is, but still, why should she get her ksuva? The only reason why we require a husband to pay out the ksuva is if he wants to get divorced. And if he says, listen, honey, I'm sorry, I want to have kids, I'm going to have to divorce you and move on. So then we say, well, it's your fault that you didn't have kids with her, so pay her the ksuva. But here we're talking about a case where she wants out of the marriage because she knows that the husband's infertile and she wants to build a home. So there the argument would be, well, listen, if you don't have the mitzvah of pru urvu and he's willing to live with you, ad me'ah ve'esrim shana, what's the big deal? Just stay with him. And she says, no, I want out. So that's the reason why we tell her, well, if you don't have a mitzvah of pru urvu, you don't have an entitlement to the ksuva. You're not correct in demanding to leave. Why do you want to leave? You don't have a mitzvah to do. So what's the big deal if you don't have children? That's the argument that the Gemara is giving. The very fact that she came along and demanded to exit the marriage and wants her ksuva, and Rabbi Yochanan says she can get her ksuva, shows me that she has a mitzvah. Otherwise, what right would she have to demand the ksuva? So the Gemara says, no. Dilma biva machmas taina ki aida soy lakamid Reb Ami amrulei havli ksuva. The Gemara says, no. What if she comes with a legitimate argument, not having to do with the mitzvah of pru or vu, but rather she needs children for another reason? Like there was once a case where a woman came before Reb Ami and she said, "Give me my ksuva, I want out." So amrullah zia lo mifkidas. And he said to her, you don't have a mitzvah of pru or vu. Your husband wants to stay married to you. And if you insist on leaving, you lose your ksuva. So Amrlei, Mesibu Dila, Maiti Havi Allah Dehach Itza. So she said to him, but Rebbe, when I become old, what's going to happen to me? Who's going to take care of me? My husband will die, and I'm going to be left as a widow. And who's going to take care of me if I don't have children? So Amar Kiha Vadai Kafina. So Rabbi Ami said in that case, if that's your concern, that you're going to need someone to take care of you in your old age because you're not independently wealthy, then you have an argument to say why you're entitled to leave the marriage, because you want to start a family so that you can have someone to take care of you in your old age. See, that's what children are for, Rabbi is saying. Children are there to take care of us in our old age.
You have to tell the children.
Yeah.
How do they know that?
Right. So, and that's the reason why she's entitled to leave the marriage and to demand her ksuva, because she's entitled to have assurance for her old age. A similar case where a woman came before Rav Nachman and he said to her, you're not entitled to ksuva, your husband wants to stay married to you and you don't have a mitzvah of pru or vu. So Amrlei lo bayachach itza chutra liyado umar lekvura. So she says, but aren't I entitled to have a walking stick for my hand and a shovel for my grave? Meaning I need a child who will be able to help me walk and help to bury me when it's time for my burial. So he said, therefore, so Amar Kiha Vadai Kafina. Yes, you're right. That's a good reason. And if that's your reason for wanting out of the marriage, that you can build a new home, so then the husband has to divorce you and he has to pay the ksuva. Yehuda v'Chizkiya ta'omim hayu, echad nigmarat surasa l'sof tisha, ve'echad nigmarat surasa l'tchila shiva. The Gemara now tells us a story about the two sons of Rebbe Chia. They were twins. One was named Yehuda and one was named Chizkiya. And they were twins, and the Gemara tells us that one twin was formed fully at 7 months, and the other one took much longer to gestate and to finish. He had a regular gestation of 9 months. Now, why the Gemara tells us this part of the story is really unclear. My assumption is, as you'll see from the story, is that it was because of this dissonance in the gestation periods that caused Mrs. Rebbe Chia to have a lot of pain during the pregnancy. She had a very difficult pregnancy as a result. Now, Yehudas devisu de Rebbe Chia havalot sar leida, so that she, as a result, had a lot of pain in giving birth and throughout the pregnancy. This Mrs. Rebbe Chia, her name was Yehudis, and therefore she wanted to figure out a way not to have more children. So Shanoi mana va'asi l'kami de Rebbe Chia. She put on a disguise and comes before Reb Chia disguised as another woman. And she asks him, Amra itza mifkada priya or revia? Amar la lo. So she said, Rebbe, does a woman have a mitzvah of pru or vu? And he said to her, no, you don't have a mitzvah of pru or vu. So therefore, Azla ishtayasama de akarta. So she went ahead and drank an elixir of infertility that would cause her to be sterilized. Now, it's important to know that halacha lamaisa, a woman does not have a right to do this. A woman, just because she doesn't have a mitzvah of pru or vu, there's still a rabbinic prohibition, at least, and according to the Vilna Gaon, even deoraisa, a woman does not have a right to be sterilized. A woman is not allowed to, for example, have her tubes tied. Even after the husband has fulfilled the mitzvah of pru or vu, a woman is not allowed to be sterilized. So just understand that this is not halacha l'maisa. But in any event, l'sofi gloi milsa, afterwards the husband, Reb Chia, discovers who this woman is, and Amar la iku yaldas lichara kar sachrita. Oh, if only you would have been able to give me another litter of children. In other words, another set of twins. I would have wanted to have more children with you. And how do we know this? The Amar Mar Yehuda v'Chizkiya achi pazi v'tavi achvasa, that Reb Chia afterwards had to take another wife because he wanted to have more children. And as we know that he had one set of twins who were boys, Yehuda and Chizkiya, and he had another set of twins who were girls, and their names were Pazi and Tavi, which are two words for fine gold. In other words, it seems like Rivke either divorced her or he took a second wife because he continued having children. So frek the Gemara v'lo mifkidi. So in conclusion, you mean to tell me that women do not have the mitzvah of pru or vu? The ha'amar Rav Acha bar Rav Ketina am Rabbi Yitzchak ma'isa b'isha echas shechetzia shivcha v'chetzia bas chorin v'kafu es rabba bas chorin. There's a story that there was once a woman who couldn't get married because she was half slave and half free. So she couldn't marry a free man because she's still a shivcha on half of her. She can't marry an eved because she's free on the other hand. So she can't get married. So the rabbis forced the guy who owned half of her to free her so that she could get married. Now, if there's no mitzvah of pru or vu, so what's the big deal if she doesn't get married, right? Why was it so compelling? Why was it so necessary for her to get married? So the Gemara says, Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak minag hefker na'aguba. The answer is not because she had the mitzvah of pru or vu, but rather because she was a problem in the neighborhood. Why? Because what was happening is that because she saw she couldn't get married, she started having illicit flings with different men, and it was creating a big problem. So all the women in the community came to the Rav and said, "You got to do something about this lady. She's making big problems in the neighborhood." So the Rav paskined that you have to free her so that she can get married and make an honest girl out of her. Have a wonderful